Our creative writing class left off with figurative language, and so we are now to proceed with figures of speech. Figures of speech would happen to be a form of figurative language where we provide expressions. Yeah, at least Josh, the good thing here is that the recording of this session will be watched, or Rance would have a chance to watch this later on, so that he will not have to miss the input that I'm going to share together with the module that he has. The thing with figures of speech is that they are not supposed to be interpreted in a literal sense. They are figurative because aside from them adding beauty into whatever expressions you provide, they show the non-typical or uncommon style of expressing our thoughts and ideas. And once again, they are greatly welcome in the field of creative writing because from the term itself, figurative, they provide creativity and style to our work or to our expressions and sentences. The ones that you could find in the module are 15 of the many figures of speech that we have in the list. Simile is maybe the most common among them all, with an indirect comparison of at least two entities or units. Indirect because the comparison makes use of expressions expressions such as like or as. For example, my friend is like the sun. So the word friend, the person, friend, and the celestial body, the sun, are being indirectly compared. There is a particular characteristic of that friend of mine which could also be related to one of the many characteristics of the sun. And so they're indirectly being compared. That's simile. The removal of expressions like or as would lead to would lead to the creation of metaphor. Metaphor is a direct comparison now. So for example, you might say, my friend is the sun of my life. You are you are the apple of my eye. You are the sunshine that brings joy to my life. My father is a my father is the law of the house. So there are direct comparisons. We don't anymore use any expression like or as. We just proceed with the direct comparison of the two units being compared because again, like how it works with simile, a characteristic of one unit is seen to be true as well to another unit. And that's what makes them similar. Onomatopoeia, by the way, I took this module online to have it shared with you. I found its discussion all right. But then I found that onomatopoeia and alliteration have been placed under figures of speech. In my high school discussions, I have shared to my students that onomatopoeia and Josh left that onomatopoeia and alliteration are not actually figures of speech. Because if you look at once again the definition of figures of speech, these are expressions not to be taken in their literal definitions or meanings. Therefore, these expressions have underlying meanings. However, if you look at onomatopoeia and alliteration, these two contribute to sound. They appeal to sound instead of the meaning of the expression. Instead of classifying them as figures of speech, there's a better category where we put these two. We put them under poetic devices or figures of sound. But for the purpose of this module, let them stand under figures of speech. But at least you have known by now that more than being called a figure of speech, these are better than being called a figure of speech. Onomatopoeia and alliteration are rather figures of sound. Going to onomatopoeia, this is an imitation of sounds, of the sounds created in nature or the sounds that surround you. Like the bang of a gun. So like that's the sound that guns provide. Or when you shoot a gun, when you shoot a person with a gun, where you shoot something with a gun, there's like a bang that you could hear. Or the boom that you heard from a particular vehicle or from an explosion. These are imitations or attempts to do an imitation of whatever sound could be heard in our surroundings or environment. The hissing of a snake, as snakes create the sound. So that's onomatopoeia. My connection is again. I can you still hear me? You cannot. You can hear me, no? Hello? Rance is here now. It's good that Rance is here. Rance, we have already discussed from simile to metaphor. Now we're on onomatopoeia. There was really a problem with the internet connection here, Rod. A problem that since last year has not been solved. So onomatopoeia again is an imitation of sounds of whatever it is that you could hear in the environment or of anything that surrounds you. And again, I lost my internet connection. I just got back and I lost my internet connection. Hello? There. My cursor isn't working.
Now, punta muna tayo sa final answer. Sir, pwede po ba hanggang dito lang po yung kaya po, sir? So,
For a while, for a while.
for now,
There.
standard.
Next to onomatopoeia is personification. In the list, you'll find personification in number 4. Personification is a figure of speech that allows an inanimate or anything that is not human, anything that is non-human, to be able to have characteristics of human beings, to be able to do what humans can do, to have the attributes of humans for those non-human entities. That's what we do with personification. We make something, we make an object, a plant, a tree, or anything that is non-human take on whatever humans actually. So that's personification. For instance, you say the trees are dancing. Dancing is a particular action or behavior that's common, that's quite expected to be done by human beings. But we gave it to inanimate objects, to trees. I'm not saying that trees do not have life. My point here is that trees are non-human entities. And yet, we are giving them human attributes. We have endowed them with human attributes. That's what completes the process of personification. Apostrophe. Apostrophe is a figure of speech where we call on something that is not in our midst. We speak, we call, we recognize something, we try to communicate with something that is not physically in our midst. We might call on the dead. That's possibly an available option. We might call on a hero who again isn't in our midst at the time that the line or expression was said. We might call on a divine being, or we might talk to a concept or an abstract idea or notion, like peace. Where are you right now? Peace is one that is abstract. It is a concept. However, you have made use of it as though you are speaking to that concept, kind of hoping that it gives a response to you, creating some form of conversation with one that is not physically in your midst, one that cannot be physically seen. And so that's apostrophe. Alliteration is a repetition of initial consonant sounds, or an initial consonant sound in a line or in a group of lines. And so for alliteration, the closest that we could associate to this would be tongue twisters. If you recall your lessons or experience of tongue twisters, there is a dominant initial consonant sound that could be heard in the completeness of the line or of that group of lines. Like in that Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled pepper, there's a aspirated sound that's really dominant. Or the she sells seashells on the seashore common line, there's a dominant consonant sound again, and that contributes to alliteration. Synecdoche. This happens when you have made a part represent a whole, or a whole is made to represent the parts. For example, in our classroom, 12 eyes listen to the teacher. 12 eyes would mean 6 people who are listening to the teacher. Unless one student in that class has only one eye. Because if that's the case, then the other student has 3 eyes. Probably. There's like a different distribution of eyes in that group of students. So, but on a quite expected understanding, two eyes for every person, 12 eyes in total, Monsters University. So if that's the case, no, the sentence could probably be read like this: 13 eyes are listening to the teacher. Wow, the number of eyes is odd. That means that there's one that really has a different structure as the others. So we are making the eyes represent the number of persons or the total, the count for every individual. So that's synecdoche. Close to synecdoche is metonymy. Synecdoche and metonymy both practice the use of substitution, except that synecdoche goes into a specific practice of substitution, where a part represents the whole, or the other way around, the whole represents the part. Synecdoche, that we reserve that to synecdoche. By the way, it's not synecdoche. You look at the pronunciation in my with my mouth. Synecdoche. Synecdoche. It's not synecdoche. It's synecdoche. So gone are the days that you would say, like when someone takes a picture of you, you don't anymore say cheese. You can say synecdoche, or diba, it's more prolonged. Synecdoche than to say cheese. Synecdoche. It looks stupid in the camera. Metonymy is the general practice of substituting words with another word, hoping that the idea of these two words are actually the same. That's the substitution that it tries to do. For instance, the pen is mightier than the sword. That's a famous line under the figure of speech metonymy. The word pen there is meant to symbolize diplomacy, while the word sword is meant to substitute for violence. That instead of saying diplomacy is better than violence, you might use substitutions and representations. And so we go with the pen is mightier than the sword. Oxymoron. This happens when two contradictory terms are placed beside each other, creating a new expression understood with a different meaning. For example, original copy. Maybe you've heard of people use that expression. This is an original copy of the document. If it's an original, then it's not supposed to be a copy of something. A copy of something should not be an original document. You look at the example found in the module, oh, loving hate. Those who are in love are not supposed to be showing hate. And if they hate each other, they're not supposed to be in love. Or, when you might say this line, I am all alone in this world. The word alone suggests of only one person or only one being. Yet you are using the word all. The word all denotes many people. Yet you have placed all together with the word alone to give us the idea that you are just by yourself. And only by yourself you are there in that place. Paradox. This is the use of a statement that appears to contradict its own self. Like, water, water, water everywhere, yet no water to drink. I think this came from the Mariner's Tale, because that was the story behind that poem, is that there is a mariner who got stranded in the middle of the sea. So the mariner is surrounded by so much water, yet not an ounce from it could be drunk, because drinking salt water would result more to a quicker dehydration. So that's the idea. The sentence itself poses a contradiction in idea. Water, water, water everywhere, yet no water to drink. It's a paradox. Litotes or litotes for number 12. By the way, we pronounce that as litotes with a z. If you pronounce it as litotes, if you pronounce it as lito with a stress on the second syllable, it's pronounced as litotes. Can I hear you pronounce it? Litotes. Litotes. Unmute, unmute, unmute.
positive 15.
Litotes
And
or
then,
litotes.
15. Negative 15 plus 16 is positive 1.
It's take note with the first pronunciation, the last sound is a z, like litotes. Second pronunciation with the stress on the second syllable, it's litotes. Litotes.
Negative 4 for
This
y.
is created by having, this is made by having two negative expressions together.
Minimum of 1 which is equal to 1.
The creation of which, or the combination of the two negatives, create an understatement, which is like a positive impression or meaning that is formed by the negatives, two negatives combined. For instance, you are not ugly. Not is a negative expression. Ugly is a negative term.
13. Kasi
The
mahirap
combination of these two would suggest that the person is
if you look at
beautiful.
Pacific,
The person is pretty.
Michelle.
So that's the positive meaning created by the combination of the negative expressions, the two negative expressions. This is not difficult.
Plus
And so
192
it is
y
easy.
plus 32.
Irony is a contradiction of what the statement says and what the statement supposedly means. And its variations could be verbal, situational, or dramatic. Take for instance when someone says, "Wow, you have grown so tall. Now you can reach the doorknob." And I think that's not a good statement because that's rather an insult that you're telling someone. For you to say that someone is tall, I mean the height should really be well recognized. But for the person to only be able to reach the doorknob, you can just imagine that the person really didn't grow as tall as how you would really expect for someone to be. Rhetorical questions. These are questions that rather want to make a point than to elicit an answer. We pose these questions, but we do not want the question. I mean, we are not really expecting for the question to be answered at the onset of saying or stating the question. Rather, it's one that triggers thoughts. And then when the rhetorical question is posed, people think, they come up with answer for themselves, and so you proceed with the rest of whatever statements you want to say after that rhetorical question. Allusion is a figure of speech that uses a reference to persons in history, persons in stories, to events, or to objects, and that there is a particular reason on why you have referred to them. There's like a backstory that you want to consider in reference to them. There are types of allusions that are indicated here. The first one is a geographical allusion when you are in reference to a particular location. Like the Mayon volcano is the Fujiyama in the Philippines. So the Mayon the Mayon volcano is compared directly to Fujiyama because there's like a background. By the way, sir, am I not seeing metaphor here? Allusion is an extended metaphor. Please take note of that. Allusion as a figure of speech is an extended metaphor. The extension lies on the story or the background that you know behind the comparison that you are doing. Take for instance when I say, "My friend is the belle of my life." Where do we know of the name of Belle? Belle comes out as a character in one of the many children's stories that we know. Belle is the princess in Beauty and the Beast. So when you use Belle as a comparison to that friend, that means that that friend of yours goes through that same story or more probably has a similar experience with Belle in Beauty and the Beast. Not that that friend of yours has met a beast, but has probably gone through a similar experience. Or like, did you know that my mother was once a Cinderella in her life? Which means that your mother had that similar experience as Cinderella. So you see, there's a background story that we are trying to bank on in order to complete the comparison under allusion. It's not as simple as my life is a phone. No. That's just regular metaphor. What's in my life that's common with that of a phone. But if you say my life is a Harry Potter series.
Sure.
That means it's a more unique version, yes, Rod, and it's one that is extended. When I say my life is a Harry Potter series, that means that the journey and experience that I have so far in my life, that gets to be similar to what the Harry Potter series contains. So the story is what I'm reflecting into. Biblical allusion when you are in reference to some biblical names or events stated and indicated in the Bible. Mythological allusion when your reference has something to do with mythological characters. Allusion in literature when these are for the regular names that we have in literature, like my classmates are basically the Romeo and Juliet in our school. Why? Because my classmate who is a boy doesn't has parents who do not like the family of the girl. Yet the girl likes the boy. And the same with the parents of the girl. Those parents of hers do not also like the boy. Same plot situation in Romeo and Juliet. That's why they do not want Romeo and Juliet to fall in love with each other, as Romeo is of the Montagues and the Capulet, and Juliet is of a Capulet. The families hate each other.
4/3 divided by 2.
Modern allusion, when your reference has something to do with modern or contemporary names, like the one that you have in the example, there is a comparison of the boyfriend to Edward Cullen, an important character in the Twilight series. Other forms of language, you have idiomatic expressions or the use of idioms, and slang or street language. Slang would be for informal kind for the informal kind of language. Street language for that matter. Maybe even be short-lived, and it may go out of date anytime. Like the use of jedge, je. Were you at that time guilty in the use of the je? Because I never did. I never subscribed to the use of je whenever I had to send messages online or through text. It was a street practice of language, and now you can't anymore feel the use of it, and please do not bring it back. Idioms. These are expressions that bear underlying meaning. Sometimes idioms are even listed under figures of speech on the premise that these expressions are not seen in their literal connotations. They need to be understood these expressions are understood behind or more than the literal meanings of the terms or expressions. Like, please break a leg later on in the contest. For sure, you would not want the person to really literally break his or her leg. You're rather hoping that the person wins, that the person bags the reward to bring home the bacon, like that. Oh, go join the event and bring home the bacon. You don't expect the person to go to the grocery and bring a bag of bacon to you, because that's the literal meaning of the term. Rather, bring home the bacon is to bring the award or the reward or the first prize or the medal. Bring whatever it is that's to be won in that particular event. See, idiomatic expressions not seen in the light of their literal meanings. Diction is another part of language. I'm quite surprised why people put diction as a criterion, one of the criteria during singing competitions. I've heard of this. In a singing competition, they would include diction. I still don't get that part because as defined, diction technically refers to the correctness in the choice of words or the choice of words that a person makes in his or her statements or in his or her composition. I would understand if diction comes in for extemporaneous speeching.
That's how we will answer problems properly by a quick
Why did I even notice by mistake? What is that?
So,
I would understand if diction comes out as one of the criteria in extemporaneous speeches or extemporaneous speaking contests or in essay writing contests. But when it comes to singing competitions, I don't know why they would put diction when the singer just simply says or sings out the lines that are already in the composed song. unless the contest is an original singing competition. Like you sing your original composition. Okay, that I give that to diction. But for those who have, like, I've listened to so many singing competitions. Diction. Why did the person compose his or her own song? The person did not. So I don't know what their point really is, but going to the strict definition of diction, which is the choice of words, technically it cannot be part of a singing competition if not for an original composition category. With the writer of the song. On that case, Rod, I would put it under an original singing competition contest. Original song composition contest. Because your choice of words there would definitely matter to create the totality of the text of the song. But if it were already a made song, like a composed song, and you're going to have your rendition for it, then I think that's not where diction comes in. Maybe with beauty contests, that I could consider diction, because that's also where pageant candidates would come in with their right use of words. Extempos, basically, or impromptus, that's what they're actually doing. Syntax. Syntax has something to do with the arrangement of words in a line or in a sentence. And that could affect the meaning of the sentence. Sometimes, syntax in poetry even contributes to how words are being read, how lines are being read. It's important that before reading out loud a material, we would know where to start and when to stop, where to stop. We are reminded that we are in poetry, we should do it in thought units. In prose, we are reminded to read them in sentences. And the way words are arranged in a thought unit or in a sentence contributes to how that line is supposed to really be interpreted. Euphemism is another literary device that has something to do with language because it tries to make something appear less cruel or less rude when the intent was to express something that's quite rude. But then you're asking only for you're trying to do it in a lesser evil or less rude kind of expression, making it a bit nicer than to say someone died, which is just too direct. You might say someone has gone to the other side. Someone has left earlier than everybody else. See, than to be so direct and blunt with it. Then the last one, which is so important in the field of creative writing, is the theme. Every selection, every material in creative writing revolves around a particular theme, which is the idea or central idea or topic that governs the material that we are trying to write. When we insert a theme in the text, in a material, in a creative writing output, we hope for that theme to be translated to our readers. We hope for the readers to be able to understand what that theme is. That's one great success on the end of the creative writer if our readers get our point, get the gist of what we're trying to say. However, maybe with our choice of words, the delivery of the theme comes out to be difficult. With the arrangement that we make, the difficulty comes out again. That is why these elements need to work together, need to really be in coherence. Altogether, they constitute creative writing. Questions regarding the introduction to creative writing that we had since Tuesday up until now? Questions? If you have a question, please unmute yourself. You can just unmute yourself. Anyway, there are only 4 of us in this call. I have already made your ST on this one. Your ST is quite objective. I think there are very few essay questions, but because of the many terms found in the module, I went with more of the objective type of test. But then again, there are essay questions.
So negative 40 divided by 2 is negative 7. Negative 7 squared is positive 49. Ibig sabihin, dito natin sulat yung 49 na yan.
Here's a concern from Rod. Sir, what if you are doing metaphor and you are also injecting hyperbole? Did I mention hyperbole? Did I? Hala, I'm so sorry. I forgot to mention hyperbole, no? Hyperbole, which is a form of an exaggeration. Hyperbole focuses on exaggeration. To answer the question of Rod, these figures of speech can actually work together even in just one line. You can make them act up together. For instance, uh, let's call on superhero. Let's call on a superhero. Oh, Wonder Woman, you are such a feather in terms of grace. See, what did I do there? I called on Wonder Woman, who is not in my midst. What is that kind of figure of speech? That's an apostrophe. What did I do in that same line? I compared her directly to a feather, and that is with a metaphor. And so that is a combination of figures of speech in just one expression. So I think that answers your concern, Rod. It's all right that they be combined. They can work definitely together. By the way, the pronunciation of the word is hyperbole. Hyperbole. When I was in elementary, teachers would pronounce it for us as hyperbole. Worse, there was at least one who pronounced it as hyperbole. Hyperbole. So it's not hyperbole, it's hyperbole. But the graph or diagram in math is a parabola and a hyperbola. But this figure of speech is hyperbole. Figure speech. Questions? Other questions? Yes, sir. It was in EAPP. Annotation. Yes, Josh.
2 divided by 2 is 1, 1 squared is positive.
Yeah.
Therefore, this is plus 1, and the other side of the equation is 16.
Oxymoron, Josh, lies on expressions or terms or words that are contradictory with each other and that they're placed beside each other. Paradox works where an idea in that sentence seems to contradict the sentence itself. Remember the example that I had earlier? Water, water, water everywhere, yet no water to drink. The idea there is an abundance of water, which means that supposedly there's no issue on the drinking of water. Yet there is a line that contradicted that idea within that same expression. No water to drink. And so we need to understand what brought out this line or this expression. So we go back to the mariner's tale where this expression has been coined from. Because again, that mariner was surrounded by sea. He was stranded on sea, and we are not to really supposed to drink seawater. So that's what happened. That's where the contradiction is. So I hope that clarified your question, Josh. Yeah. Okay. I like what Rod has shown earlier. Annotation. A clear example of annotation. See? For whatever, because the module that you received is an academic text. That is a segue for academic reading and in EAPP. What you have received there is an academic text. On the margin of it, you might want to write additional information. Or you might highlight something or underline something and point an arrow, connect it to an arrow with the additional information you provided. Annotation at work. A clear proof of our discussion in EAPP last Tuesday. Other concerns, other questions?
Negative 1 divided by 2 is negative 1 half. Negative 1 half squared is?
Do we still have any?
Positive 1/4.
Because if there's none, we can call it a day. Do you have some questions?
Positive 1 divided by 2 is 1 half. 1 half squared is positive 1/4. So the same value to be added to the right side as well.
Yeah?
Is 1/4. Yung tayo papasok.
I'm not sure because idiomatic expressions were really created already, and like there's already like a set or a list of idiomatic expressions. The one I mentioned earlier was something that I just made up. It may be, I'm not sure if it's listed as one of the figures or one of the idiomatic expressions. From the many things that I could recall, I haven't read, I think, that one, but it just came out randomly earlier.
plus 1/4
Okay. If we don't have any other Rans, what about you, Rans? Do you have any question, Rans?
4 I5/2. So this is
Okay, because if there's none,
5/2. So our
we can call it a
square
day.
radius
Thank you so much for your time, grade 12. Goodbye and thank you.